Hi guys, I want to talk about Leonard, and if you don't know who Leonard is, he's the character in my current playthrough of Skyrim Special Edition, and if you didn't know that, I have no idea why on earth you got directed to this video, but it is probably going to make no sense to you whatsoever and be extremely strange, so I'm sorry for whatever algorithm shoved you in this direction. The reason I'm making this video is I'm still getting comments about the fact that Leonard does not use a bow. I mean, he carries a crossbow on his horse just in case, but he never uses it. So people are sort of saying, why do you even have it? Why won't you use it? And this has actually been going on in one form or the other pretty much since the start. There's been a lot of people that were quite surprised to find Leonard not going the stereotypical thief route and, you know, relying on small blades and bows, which, let's face it, is the sort of the classical idea we have of the fantasy rogue, this leather-clad, small blade-wielding, possibly dual-wielding, bow-using assassin, really. When it comes down to it, that's the image we've got for the fantasy thief. And so I thought I'd make a video where I just sort of lay this subject to rest once and for all. In a way, this is going to be like my You Don't Know Jack video. For those of you who don't know, Jack is my Fallout New Vegas character, and he never puts any points into speech, and a lot of people were getting quite frustrated, sort of saying, why aren't you raising up speech? Because speech is the most powerful skill in Fallout New Vegas. What are you doing? And of course, that turned out to be the very reason I wasn't putting any points into speech. I wanted to experience the game without that skill because that skill is actually very, very powerful, and I wanted to see what the game would be like without it. Well, in some ways, the same is true for this playthrough of Skyrim. Bow is very powerful in Skyrim, especially if you're a stealth character. You can actually stealth kill a lot of things in this game without really having to put as much effort in as if you were, you know, if you had to try and sneak up on them and stab them. It really does reduce the need to push the boundaries of enemy detection, and even with the mods I'm using to make stealth a lot tougher, it would remove a lot of the challenge in a lot of scenarios. Bow and stealth is a very powerful mix. Now, I could tell you that, you know, the reason I wanted Leonard to get up close and personal when killing someone with, say, a dagger is that it's far more realistic. If you get behind someone, you can get your hand over their mouth and put your dagger into their lungs so they can't scream, and thus you've got a chance of killing that person without people nearby noticing. Believe it or not, if there are people within 2 or 3 meters, the chances of you doing that are pretty slim. And it is a lot harder to have the same effect when you shoot someone with a bow. Bows are actually noisier than people think. I mean, it's not like you're going to be able to hear a bow twang from a mile away, but if you're in a room that's, say, 30 feet across by 20 feet and you fire a bow into someone, everyone in the room is going to hear the bow twang. So I could give you some sort of spiel about how it's a lot more realistic, but the simple truth of the matter is I wanted it to be a little more challenging from the stealth aspect. I wanted Leonard to have to make the distance, and with the mods I'm using, that is quite tough because you can't rely on the sneak skill itself. Even at 100, you are going to need to either avoid line of sight, avoid areas of light, or of course use something like a potion of invisibility, which does add some sort of limitation. You can't go invisible once a minute, you know, for an entire dungeon unless you've brought 60 potions of invisibility, which is unlikely. So I wanted to add not just some semblance of realism, but some extra aspect of challenge, something for Leonard to overcome. Now, obviously, as Leonard progresses, he's going to get more tools to overcome that problem, and eventually it will become reasonably trivial as he gets more potions, as he gets powers like the Shadow of Nocturnal. things like that will help him along, but he's had to acquire those. He's had to move forward and gain those abilities. Whereas, let's face it, bow and sneak, you can start using from the minute go. You almost never run out of arrows. And indeed, you could have imagined a scenario where Leonard started the game sneaking and shooting things with bows and ended the game 10 chapters later still sneaking and shooting things with bows, because bow is actually a really effective tool to deal with 99.9% of the challenges that you meet in Skyrim, whether it's rats, whether it's undead, whether it's people, or whether it's dragons. A bow is just a really good weapon. You can lean on that and be an archer from beginning to end. And I sort of wanted Leonard to have to progress a little, to not just progress as a character. In fact, Leonard's character is relatively static compared to compared to, say, Richard, but I wanted him to have to sort of focus on different aspects to solve different problems. So in the first chapter, the early stages, he had to focus on stealth. He spent a lot of time in other people's homes, not killing anyone. He then had to start learning how to get close to people to kill them, because that became a requirement. And, he's going to come across situations where the dagger and even stealth are not enough to solve the problem. He's already coming across enemies that either can't be poisoned or he just can't kill them quickly enough. He's going to have to adapt. He's going to have to develop some new skills. And the problem with stealth and bow is you almost don't have to do that. You could, once a bow comes into the equation, I have a feeling it's the sort of thing that it's the whole, if you've got a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. Well, if you've got a bow, every problem looks like you could shoot it with a bow. And in fact, you probably can. So I wanted to kind of avoid that. But if I'm being completely honest, there is another reason I did want to avoid bow. And that's because it would have made this character way too similar to Richard. Richard was a warrior. He used sword, shield, and bow, but when you think of him, you definitely think bow use. He was a warrior that used a bow, and I was worried that this playthrough would become very much yet another archer playthrough, and I wanted to avoid that. In fact, I wanted to avoid Leonard being any sort of warrior. I mean, that's why he's brought someone like Inigo along. Inigo is the muscle. Leonard is, I don't want him to actually become a competent warrior of any sort. In a face-to-face fight, I want Leonard to be on the back foot. I don't want to play another Richard. But there is also a sort of desire to play something a little different. I mean, if you think about it, I do this quite a lot. I played a very unlikely sorcerer with Steve. Richard was the most unlikely warrior you've ever seen, and I wanted Leonard to be pretty much a non-stereotypical thief. Again, you do have this image of the thief in the fantasy world: leather, bow, blades, sneak. We've all done, well, I say we've all, most people who've played Skyrim a number of times have done a stealth playthrough, and you tend to become very good at sneaking around, shooting people with bows, stabbing them in the back, picking locks, but then every single character in Skyrim ends up good at picking locks just because of that's the game ends up making you pick tons of locks. And I'm going to admit something now that I think will resonate with a lot of you. Leonard is the first character I've had whose pickpocket skill has gone over 50, I think. Even my stealth playthroughs, I almost never pickpocketed. It's just one of those things. I did it when I absolutely had to because it was part of a quest, usually the Thieves Guild's quests. But even then, half the time, if I got one of those quests, I'd say, oh no, give me something different. Actually, you can sort of choose not to take those. I would always take something else. And I would focus on breaking into people's houses, stealing their goods, that type of thing. And I wouldn't pickpocket because I just didn't enjoy that side of things with the sort of thieves I was playing. And they were the very stereotypical sorts of thieves. I mean, I've only played one or two thief characters, but they were very much assassins rather than people who just acquired goods. With Leonard, I wanted to play more of a classic thief, actually. Somebody who is, using a variety of skills to get in a variety of places, or to acquire a variety of items. So I wanted to focus on picking pocket. I wanted to focus on lockpick as well, and sneak. But I did actually envisage him being more of a confidence trickster as well, using speech. But Skyrim just really is not a game that is built around the speech aspect. It's one of the major weaknesses of the game. So there are some speech checks, but they're pretty basic, and there's very little need to progress in that sort of I don't know what you would call it, to progress down that perk tree, because there's not really a lot on offer. It's a very simplistic speech system. I have never really explored alchemy that much in any of my previous playthroughs. It was always a side skill, much like blacksmithing or even lockpicking. It's just a sort of skill you pick up for many characters. You have it so that you can make healing potions, you have crafting so you can hone your weapons, and you have lockpicking because you're playing Skyrim, right? I mean, those sort of skills just go with the territory. But I wanted to use alchemy for something more, and it's been a lot of fun, actually, trying to make a character effective around that skill. It's not easy, and I do realise that is not something that's going to make him able to handle a lot of the other content in the game. I do appreciate that alchemy is going to be useless in some ways, at least the poisons, against quite a lot of opponents, but it's still been fun to see and experience that side of things. Now, I do understand that if I keep playing Leonard, if I keep doing more and more chapters, and I do intend to, more and more content, I will keep coming across things that he cannot handle with his current skill set. I will need to expand his skill set or the tools at his disposal to succeed. But what I'm going to try and do is make that happen organically where possible, but also in a way where he always has the tool for the task at hand, or he's always aiming towards the tool for the task at hand, but once he gets that tool, it won't necessarily give him the tool that will handle every situation, so he's always got something else to go for. And as I've said, the bow is probably not one of those things, because once he's got the bow, that is it. He's then got the tool that he can solve most problems with. So it isn't that, Leonard is only going to pickpocket and he's only going to use poisons. Now, that may change, but it's unlikely that I will be taking him in the direction that's the path of least resistance, because once I've done that, that will be his path for the rest of the game. Now, of course, I do come up with character reasons for why Leonard has not taken bows and crossbows and all of his other little quirks. He doesn't like face-to-face combat. It's messy, it's dangerous. He doesn't, he has to engage in sword combat on occasion, but he's not a big fan of it. So the bow would seem to be an obvious choice, actually. So very early on, I pointed out Leonard didn't like to carry big weapons. Now, I know some swords are reasonably big, but they're actually sidearms. A bow is something that, you have to string across your back. Now, I know it's Skyrim, and in Skyrim, everything's in the magical pockets. But this is the idea. Leonard doesn't want large, unwieldy weapons on his person. And, the bow took a lot of strength to draw back and took a lot of stamina and was tiring. And, of course, he's not a very good shot at it at the moment. And so it's not as effective at the moment. But because of his desire to always be subtle, a bow wouldn't fit. It's not subtle. It's strapped to your back. The same is true of a crossbow. You can have a stylish sword at your belt and a dagger or two and look stylish and gentlemanly, whereas you can't have a crossbow swinging from your hip or strapped to your back and look anything less than a crossbowman. So that's the sort of thinking. Leonard has avoided, well, he hasn't avoided, Leonard has never had any interest in those weapons because they come at a price. They come at the price of having to carry around large weapons. And again, I'm completely aware of the fact that he is then carrying 15 sets of armor in his magic backpack and so on. So in many ways, this is a contrived character trait, but it is a character trait that I have given him. That along with the sort of desire to avoid direct bloodshed. Leonard really sees himself as smarter than everyone else, more stylish, more efficient. You know, he has grace. At least he thinks he does. He imagines being able to sort of wander into an area and take everyone out without them ever seeing him and without him ever having to spill blood. He could just sort of plant a poison on them and they fall over dead, and he moves in like a ghost and then everyone just dies. He's like death incarnate. You know, he doesn't need to raise any sweat. He doesn't need to try hard. We all know that's not true, but this is Leonard's personal sort of narrative. This is the dream for him. So that is basically it. Leonard is unlikely to ever go the route of bow user. He is almost not, well, I can guarantee 99% he will not become a warrior of renown. He will never be good in face-to-face combat. At least that is my thinking at the moment. Who knows what will change in 3 to 4 years? I don't see that as something I want. I enjoy making Leonard have an area where he's out of his comfort zone. In fact, I quite like putting Leonard in places where he's not in his comfort zone. I like his comfort zone to be quite small so that I can inflict discomfort on him. I'm a terrible person, yes. So anyway, that's it. That is the thinking. That is why I am choosing the skills I'm choosing and not choosing others. I hope that explained it and lays it to rest once and for all. So thank you for listening to this ramble, and I will catch you guys next time.